What is up, everybody? Welcome to Destination the Show, episode 72. It is Thursday, March 20th. Jamie Cameron, joined as always by Jeremy Nygaard. Jeremy, I haven't talked to you like in person for several weeks, actually. How's it going?
Yeah, it's it has been a long time. I sat down here and I was like, when was the last time we recorded together?
So long ago.
And so that was the one that I went off screen for 10 minutes,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Uh, so that was a pet emergency that didn't turn out well. Um, and then you had a nice vacation,
I did have a nice vacation.
and then I got really sick.
And now we're
So
both in the wars.
in
We're
the
we're we're both in the wars. You got like flu. You've had flu in your house.
right,
I've been under the weather, like less extreme version. You also had a back issue, and I have a neck issue currently. So we're just like a couple of old guys
we need to rename this.
doing old guy stuff.
Yeah, grumpy old man maybe.
Exactly. How are you feeling, man? Are you feeling any better?
I'm getting there. I couldn't feel worse. I wasn't sure if I was going to survive on Sunday and Monday. I did, but it's it's hard because then you have a small child who's also sick, and then
That is a bummer.
that it impedes your ability to just do nothing. And so it's luckily, I mean, it's spring break for us, so
Hmm.
I haven't had to try to do work stuff too. So yeah, I mean, enough about me. Tell me all about the trip.
Dude, spring training, everything I thought it would be and more. It was so great. I'll give you a couple of just quick couple of reflections for folks who are interested. I mean, it was just awesome. We were down there for a week down in Fort Myers. We rented a place in Cape Coral, which is, about 20-minute drive from where the Twins play. Had my whole family down there. First of all, it's just great to be warm, consistently warm for a week. And we structured it like a game one day, kind of a family day the next day. And so that was super nice. Broke up the baseball a little bit. And then, yeah, got a chance to visit the Red Sox complex, JetBlue Park. Was down there with my brother-in-law, who's a huge Red Sox guy. So we kind of split our days. Great park, really fun. That was the first kind of game that we went to, and then the rest was mostly dedicated to being at, what is it called? Lee County Health Sports Complex. I want to say the name is now the Twins spot in Fort Myers, and amazing, um, beautifully run operation. Everyone down there is like happy and helpful and friendly. Um, the access you have is unbelievable. So you can just, before you go into the stadium, you can just walk on up to the batting cages and have a clear view of like every Twins player you want to see taking BP. So I followed Luke Keeschel around for the best part of a week. Watched a good amount of BP. My only one regret, dude, is this. I had one day that was like Twins backfield day where I was like, all I'm gonna do is hang out on backfields and watch um, coaching sessions, watch um, bullpens, live BP games, whatever. And that was the one day within a 14-day window that there was rain, and everything on the backfields was rained out that day, which is kind of a bummer. But that's Florida weather for you. Just cannot recommend going down there enough if you're considering it. It was really fun.
How many times did Luke Keeschel awkwardly make eye contact with you when you were like taking video of him? Which I know you were because you sent it.
Yeah, I did. I did spread my stalkerish habits around right between a bunch of different guys. So no weird eye contact. I tried to get as much video of guys as I possibly could. I was just particularly impressed with how he kind of carried himself, routine, all of that. Super. I mean, he had a great spring in terms of his performance in games and in camp too. So excited to see how his 2025 goes. I certainly think that he's going to make his major league debut. We're going to see him maybe sooner than later in Minneapolis. So that was great.
Well, at this rate, he might be the starting third baseman.
Dude, we definitely have to talk about that. But yeah, it's a bit of cap on spring training stuff, and then we'll hit some housekeeping. Go if you get a chance. I also want to give a quick shout out. I met a guy down there called Peter, who actually got in touch with the show via email. I was like, I'm down in Fort Myers. Go down here every spring. Let me know if you're there. Met up with him at a game. Nicest human being I've ever met. Was very complimentary about the podcast, which was beyond surprising. Bought me a beer. Peter, great to meet you. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Yeah, Florida's just full of people who are happy to be warm, Jeremy, is the biggest conclusion I came to from being there.
How far did you venture away from the Cape and Fort Myers? Did you go to like Sanibel?
Oh yeah, we went to Sanibel because so you know this, but I have two relatively little kids, and so a beach day was a big part of it. So we went to I want to say it's called Bowman's Beach on Sanibel, which is like all shells and kids just mooching around on the beach for the whole day. So we did all of that. We explored a good amount. Still got 3 games in, good amount of time in the complex. So it was really great.
Good stuff.
Yep. So quick housekeeping before we jump into all things baseball related. Ways that you can support the show by liking and subscribing on your podcast platform of choice. You can find all of our episodes in video content if you want to look at our faces, although this week I don't know why you would. The YouTube handle there is at Destination the Show. We also like and appreciate when folks send us questions. You can do that on Twitter. The handle is at DTS_pod1. On Blue Sky at Destination the Show. Or if you want to send us an email, you can get in touch with us at destinationtheshow@gmail.com. We got several great questions today. And so what we're going to do, Jeremy, is we'll kind of round up some spring training stuff, a little bit of minor league stuff, a little bit of major league stuff. And then for the most part, we're going to jump into kind of a half a mailbag episode because we got questions, and this is kind of our on-ramp to starting to talk about the draft, which I know you can't wait for.
I can't.
So let's go ahead and jump in, man. I suppose we better dig into injury news first. Unfortunately, that is a part of the sport, certainly a part of spring training. And I think we should start here because we focus on the minor leagues more than anything else in addition to the draft. And that is the news that Matt Canterino out for the entire 2025 season after undergoing shoulder surgery to tighten ligaments in his shoulder. Jeremy, he is soon, sadly, going to pass 1,000 days without appearing in an in-season game in affiliated ball. Your reaction and your thoughts on what it means for Canterino's future.
Yeah, so I mean, I think over the last 15 years, there's been a number of X is going to miss the season tweets or however you get your information. And, I remember waking up to the Miguel Sano is going to have his UCL repaired, miss the season, and being very surprised. I remember the Joe Nathan, they went in and turned out that he's going to now miss the season, and being like absolutely shocked and like saddened that this is happening. With Canterino, I saw the tweet and I had zero surprise. Like it would have been more surprising if it would have been like he's going to miss 3 weeks and he's going to start ramping up, and that's kind of it. All of that's to say it's really unfortunate because you've heard about the arm talent, but all that we know about is the arm health, and that it's just not there. And so the Twins will try to rehab him and see what happens. But I think at this point, and not even necessarily at this point, probably a year ago, the writing was kind of on the wall that this probably isn't going to work. And credit to him for keep working, right? Even on like some of these Twins, the little social media stuff they do, he always appears to be positive when he's it's not necessarily interviewed, but talked to.
Yep.
And you just wonder how long he's going to keep working before he says it's time to move on.
Yep. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. It's just so sad, honestly. I mean, everything you hear about Canterino, what you've seen, exactly what you said. Like whether it's like on the Diamond or interviews on various shows or podcasts. I know there was a fair amount of excitement building about him returning in spring training this time last year. And it just sucks. It's just so unfortunate for a guy just to have absolutely no run. I mean, he hasn't even pitched a game in AAA yet. Um, it's just really really unfortunate. Obviously, it's part of the game. We wish him a speedy recovery. I really hope to see him at some point in 2026, but it's just feels like a tough road and an uphill slog. And I personally just can't imagine the amount of kind of mental toughness and fortitude you need to keep going through that year after year after year. It's tough. Other injury news, Jeremy, that we should touch on that is pertinent to the major league roster. Royce Lewis pulled up with a hamstring strain on the first game broadcast on Twins TV in the second inning, in the middle of an interview with manager Rocco Baldelli when Corey Provis was asking him how he managed his injuries. So Rocco had to hop off and go attend to Royce Lewis. Unfortunately, I think the thing that he and Canterino share is just persistent chronic injuries have kept him off the field, such that I don't know how you can count on Lewis to kind of surpass that Buxtonian 100 game per season threshold. And so, in the interest of not sounding like a broken record and kind of repeating how unfortunate that is, how do you see the Twins handling this? Who do you think is getting the majority of the playing time at third base? And kind of what are some of the roster battle implications there for the Twins as they get ready to break camp here?
Was that did that happen on Sunday?
Mm, I think so.
Was it Sunday? I
Sunday.
just
Theo says Sunday. Yep.
remember like being in and out of a nap, semi-conscious, and I wake up and I look and Royce Lewis is hobbling off the field, and I'm like, yeah, this seems like a bad dream all over again. Uh, it's a bummer, but I think like with Buxton, we've kind of got to the point where we say, well, we know what's going to happen, and when's it going to happen? What's the duration of time between the happenings going to be? And you hope for as many games as possible.
Yep.
And so he's going to miss probably the month of April, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hope that he's back sometime in May. We've done this before. Does it mean that maybe the Twins? I don't know if it speeds up or what the right word is, but it's like, would he be better off playing first base? Would he be better off being more of a designated hitter? Like the injuries happen when he's running the bases. So I don't know that right. I mean, you think about
Yeah, I agree. I like. I was gonna say I didn't want to cut across you, but I was like, I don't think it helps. Like he definitely has been injured playing the outfield, but I don't think he's been injured playing the field in the infield. It's always running around what wasn't last year's on opening day when he was
rounding second,
legging out a double against Kansas City.
So that's the hard part, right? But is that sort of stuff, all those quick twitch things that he's got to do defensively, is that impactful to his body? I don't know the answer, but it's almost like you have to start changing how you prepare both for him and for the team.
Yeah.
He was going to be the opening day third baseman, right? I mean, feel like that was one that
100%
felt really good about.
Locked in.
But there are other third basemen on the roster, right? Miranda is a third baseman. It's like, well, okay, maybe he's going to play first. Well, now we've signed other guys to play first. Where's Miranda going to end up? Oh, he's going to be the opening day third baseman, I would think. Brooks Lee got first crack at it and got scratched. So doesn't it have to be Miranda or some combination of Miranda and Willie Castro?
Yeah. So this is a good question, and like obviously we probably won't get super into the weeds and the rabbit hole here, right? I think for sure the three candidates are Miranda, Castro, and Lee. If I had to make a bet, okay, let's start here then, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree. If I just had to rank them in terms of ability to play good defense at third base, I would rank them Brooks Lee number 1, Willie Castro number 2, and Jose Miranda number 3. Any disagreements from that?
No.
However, even though Willie Castro is 2, you probably want to be able to move him around and plug him in all sorts of different places. Maybe he's playing corner outfield, maybe he's playing center field, maybe he's playing second base. And so I think you're probably down to Miranda and Brooks Lee. Brooks Lee is certainly a better defender. His bat hasn't really inspired in spring training. And this is a conversation for another day, but I think there's some like medium-term concerns about Brooks Lee's offensive profile and how that's going to play long term now that we've seen a chunk of him. So I'm not really sure who I would pick there. Maybe they play the matchups and it's probably likely that a couple of guys are splitting time, but I do think Miranda and Lee will likely log more starts than Castro defensively at third base in that month of April.
But Brooks Lee, is he healthy?
Because it was reported today that he was scratched from the lineup with back tightness.
Right. It wasn't his thing early last year. Wasn't it a back thing?
It was a back thing. I think it was a herniated disc. Theo will definitely get us right if we're incorrect.
I'll tell you, back, not fun.
It was a disc. Yeah, okay.
I'm like twice his age, and I understand that. But it's one of those things that it's just going to keep coming back, right? Isn't this an Evan Carter thing too? Like Evan Carter for the Rangers has some back injury, and it's like, oh, you were a top 5 prospect, and now you're maybe never going to be anything that we thought you would amount to be. And so that's where it becomes an issue. And Willie Castro is going to be a guy that plays significant innings.
Yep.
And I think ideally you would have him be able to play some outfield. What you said, some shortstop, some second base, some third base, some center field, some corner outfield, basically a super utility guy, right?
Right.
But don't the Twins, haven't they built their roster this year to not necessarily have to have Castro be the backup center fielder, the backup corner guy?
Yeah, for sure. And I kind of agree. I do agree with that. And like that seems like a very like pointed and specific like design and decision. But I think you also want to have that in your back pocket so that in case you get in a situation like this, Jeremy, Larnach has like a nagging injury that's like gonna keep him off his feet for 3 or 4 days, but he doesn't necessarily need to go on the IL. That way you have Bader to plug in as the plus defensive replacement, and you also have Castro to spell Buxton in that case. And so I agree they have done a really solid job, I think, of building more legitimate defensive options throughout the roster that decreases the reliance on Castro, but you probably still want to allow him to maintain some kind of defensive positional flexibility because that's where most of his value lies.
Yeah. But don't you do that by plugging him into any position anywhere? Like you can move him in game.
Sure.
And so I feel like we're going to see an awful lot of him early at third base. And then, I mean, is he probably the backup shortstop though?
I think Brooks Lee is the backup shortstop based on how they've operated in spring training. But if you're taking him off the table, if we're saying he has a disc issue and he has a nagging injury that needs to be attended to, then Castro's the guy for sure.
Right. And so I think that's what makes it hard to have your depth tested. And again, Lee was scratched 1 game, right?
Right.
That happens. But I do think that there's some depth questions already on an infield that we talked about how
I know
infielders. There's no need to sign infielders. But Lewis could come back in May and maybe Lee is good by opening day and we don't have any concerns at all. But I do think Miranda answered more questions, at least with his bat last year, late in the year, to give him an opportunity to play. And if Ty France is going to hit like he's hitting, then he just plays first base every day, right?
For sure. That's fair. I almost wanted to go down the Eddie Julian and Mickey Gasper rabbit hole with you, but I think maybe we'll save that one for next week because I think that's also a couple of guys worth digging into. I do also want to ask you a couple of bullpen related questions before we get to listener questions and jump into this mailbag. 2 bullpen questions. Preseason, when all the projections came out, Fangraphs projected the Twins as the best bullpen in baseball. We talked about it on the show at the time. I think we had a conversation, Jeremy, to the effect of like, this is a great bullpen, and it still feels like Yohan Duran and Griffin Jax reliant. In other words, they're going to accrue an outsized proportion of their value from those 2 guys. Any concerns about Duran based on what you've seen in spring? And I know you haven't maybe necessarily been in the weeds as much with watching games, but velocity's down, rarely hitting 100. And I think maybe more like pertinently, he is not missing bats anymore. He has like 3 whiffs all spring, and he's been effective enough. But this is also a trend that we're seeing that's kind of a continuation from last year where he was absolutely less effective. Still a very good back-end reliever. But do you think this is cause for concern long-term given how much of the Twins bullpen projection is kind of bound up in his performance?
I don't know if it's like long-term concern, right? I think there's some immediate concern. Is he going to be able to regain this velocity or show the velocity he's had before?
Mm-hmm.
It's often hard to make a lot of things that happen in March. And so the nice thing is if he's not right, they can say, well, Griffin Jax, you're going to be the closer. And he might, and I mean, Griffin Jax, potentially top 5 closer if you let him do it.
100%.
And so I think that's where Duran is when he's good. Is Brock Stewart healthy? I know he went out with the knee thing. It sounds like that was more just precautionary.
I think he's throwing bullpens. I think he's kind of on track for opening day.
Cole Sands, as much as I've ripped on him being an opening day player, is a guy that really fits well in this bullpen.
Cole Sands, established high leverage big league reliever. That is to you, Jeremy. Thank you.
And Alcala and Varland. Like if Duran has to go on the injured list to reset or whatever, this bullpen's good enough to get by.
Yep.
But if he's not, I mean, he's just getting to arbitration. They haven't committed any money beyond this year to him. They've actually not. Things haven't gone well in those negotiations where they just renew him and he gets less money than he deserves.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Twins aren't. We talk long term, right? As an asset, if he's completely right, great. But if the arm just doesn't work like it's supposed to, there's probably an injury. And so do what you got to do, figure it out. The Twins could withstand Yohan Duran not being 100% and still be okay with this bullpen. And I wouldn't say that, if Brock Stewart was injured, right? If Alcala's injured like he has been, I just think there's enough depth that they could get by with that. And in the short term, though, yeah, it's concerning because he's not doing what we've expected him to do. And his velocity and his ability to make people swing and miss is a huge part of what he does.
Fair. Okay, here's my second bullpen guy I want to ask you about. Iverson Castellano, Rule 5 pick from the Phillies. Here's a question. Can you possibly carry him into the regular season? Now, I know we say all the time, right? Spring training stats don't matter. We do not care that Carlos Correa is hitting 135. But let me just read you Castellanos' line in spring because this is a guy who hasn't pitched above Double-A. Let's see here. 8.2 innings pitched, 9.35 ERA so far. Striking out 27% of batters, which is great. Walking 20% of batters, 185 whip. And so obviously he struggled. I think the headline is he's just not like the stuff looks great. Fastball up to 97, 2 good secondaries in place there, but he is not throwing strikes Do you think there's any way he makes a roster? Can you carry him on your team? Can you hide him while he starts to figure it out? What do you think? Or do you think he's going back to the Phillies, or a trade is maybe in the works?
I think you could, given that they have arms that aren't healthy, right? But at the beginning of the spring, it was there's just not going to be room. How are you going to make room? Uh, right now, I think that if it's a room thing, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if they like his stuff enough, they will keep him. And you can have a bullpen arm that is designed specifically to just be thrown into low leverage and get outs. Can he get the outs? It's kind of the problem. So I'm not ready to send him back yet, just based on the fact that there's not a need for that spot. He's on the 40 man. They don't have anybody
Mm-hmm.
knocking down the door. Um, at the end, I think they're gonna probably have to try to work something out. But I do believe to work out a trade, he would still have to clear waivers, um, which I would anticipate that he would. Um, I'm just not. I'm not sure right now that they would want to give up on him, which is what they would have to do if they just send him back. And I
Yep.
do think there's probably another team out there that's not competitive at all that would like a chance because, like you mentioned, his stuff has looked good. It's just the results aren't there. Um, but I do think that when they take guys, they always take them with the intention of keeping them, and they keep them way longer than they probably should. Um, but yeah, I can see him making the roster. Um, so I would probably lean that way. He might get sent back tomorrow for all I know, um, because the results have been awful. But
Yep.
like you said, and I always say, what do March stats matter? Um, but because what I see, Tonkin, Topa, who knows what they're on? Like they're going to have a number of guys on the injured list anyway. You could get him in, um, click some of those active days away before
Mm-hmm.
he develops knee tendonitis, right? Which is what happens, and then he gets to go on the IL. So, long story short, yeah, I think there's a way, and I think they probably will look into every avenue to do that.
50-50 shot for you if
Yeah,
you had to put a percentage on it.
I'd say it's still a coin flip.
Okay. All right. Here's what we're going to do for the second half of this episode, Jeremy. We are going to dig into a mailbag, and I've split these questions up between Twins minor league system and draft because we're starting to talk draft today a little bit. I'm going to try and contain my excitement. Um, I'm going to ask you the Twins minor league system questions, so you get first crack at those, and then you can ask me the draft questions, and we'll kind of flip flop that way. So, shout out to Wyatt on Twitter because he sent like a gazillion questions. Really appreciate it. Here's your first one. Who do you predict will be the biggest risers on the Twins top 30 prospect list this year? Any candidates jump out for you, Jeremy, as biggest riser candidates?
So yeah, I mean, depending on the list that you look at, uh, everybody essentially has the three guys at the top the same.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you're not going to see Walker Jenkins jump at all. He's going to be number one. He's going to be a top five guy. Uh, Rodriguez is a top 20 global prospect. He's not going to make this huge jump. Keisho is top 65, 70 guy who will move up until he gets promoted.
Sure.
Then beyond that, in the twin system, it's kind of flavor of the day for your pitcher. Um, Connor Prelip was my top pitcher. Uh, but I think there's publications out there that don't have him in the top 15, which is already presenting itself as a mistake based on the stuff.
Yeah. Can
And
we
so,
can we quick interject there and just real quick? A really great story. I think you retweeted this actually from Pipeline like a day or so ago with good details on Prelip's current arsenal. Fastballs touch 99 now. Sliders hit 93. I mean, even if you profile him as a reliever, the stuff is absolutely ridiculous. Also, shout out to Ty Langenberg, who joined us last weekend. He spoke a lot about Prelip and Prelip stuff. So if you're curious what a teammate thinks about Connor pre-lip slider. Go check out that episode. Sorry to cut across you, man.
No, and that's perfect because I think even Baseball America said they considered him for their top 100. And so if you're looking at a publication that doesn't have him in the top half of
Mhm.
the Twins top 30, that's a huge mistake. He's already risen that high, uh, and so he would be a guy that's top that I have high on my list. Kyle DeBarge, um, another name that, and I've been behind him since he was drafted. Didn't have a great debut, but that's a long season, and I think I've thrown out the Brian Dozier comp only
Did,
because you hate comps.
did you see the DeBarge nugget in that pipeline article though too? That was interesting.
You want to play him in center field.
Yeah.
Yeah, and wasn't the comment something along the lines of if you can play center and you can play shortstop, you can play anywhere. And
Mm-hmm.
he's gonna be a gamer. He's gonna be like Luke Keeschel, only in a different body type, where they're just gonna be able to play him anywhere. And I do think that he'll be like a legitimate top 6 or 7 in the Twins system without a lot of debate
Okay.
by this year. Billy Amick, a little bit different. I'm not super high on him, but I think if depending on where he starts the season, he's going to absolutely crush until he meets resistance, which is going to happen in Double A. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So how quickly he gets to Double A is going to be kind of how high he rises.
Yep.
Because if he stays in Cedar Rapids for 3/4 of the year and does what I think he could do,
I had like
he's
25 home runs. Yeah.
he right. And then he goes to Double A, and then things change.
Quick Jeremy coughing break that I will narrate through. Continue, friend.
I'm going to need those often. And then I do think the Twins have had a number of international hitters that they've signed that haven't been great. They've had some guys that have kind of, sparked. And so I just made a list of them.
Okay.
6 guys I wrote down. Acuna, who has been awful, right? But he's got the name recognition. Is it Jose Rodriguez?
Mm-hmm.
Yasir Mercedes. Another Churiel that's not a brother, maybe a relative, Beltre and Pena. And I think out of those two, Pena and Beltre have been the best.
Mm-hmm. You can do it, Jeremy. I believe in you. For sure. And like while you're working through that coughing fit, Mercedes is a good example of this, right? So he went back and repeated the complex league because I think it was his first stint there was injury shortened, and he went back and crushed in the complex last year. Got a few games at low A to end the year, but he's a good example, right? Of one bad season doesn't mean that it's over, especially with international prospects. You kind of have to take it slow.
Right. And so, I mean, I know that's a list of a half dozen guys, but if you look at the Twins prospect list a year from now and you see a couple of these international signings in the top dozen, that shouldn't be at all surprising, right? We talked pre-recording about Tanner Hall. I was a big Tanner Hall guy. All he had to do to his arsenal was add velo, right? Twins do that to everybody.
That they do.
Yeah. And so if that happens, that could be his step forward. You talked about some other concerns about not being able to throw strikes. I get that. But if he can add right now, I think Fangraphs has his fastball as a 30. If he could make that even average and get back to throwing strikes, he could take a jump. And then another guy we talked about last year, Cade Bragg, hadn't thrown much. Can he take a step? He's a lefty.
I like Cade Bragg a lot, actually.
Is he someone that could maybe pop up on a top 30 list if he just could make it through the year healthy? So those are a handful of names that I like as guys that could rise. And then Kadeem Jow, he was also mentioned in that article. If he can stay behind the plate and continue to hit, I think he slots himself in as catcher of the future. Right.
Love that. Real quick on Zhao, because I have his page open because I was going to add him, but you already said him, dude. Yeah, obviously limited sample, only played 24 games at Fort Myers, 114 WRC plus, walked 11% of the time, struck out just 14%, controls the strike zone really well. What is it? 271, 374, 341 line. So looks like he can hit. The power hasn't come yet, but that's a ridiculously small sample. So as you say, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think they mentioned in that article, he's also potentially getting reps in center field, right? And so I think if you have a guy who's playing catcher and is getting reps in center field, that speaks to his athleticism. He's clearly a good athlete. He clearly can control the strike zone. He is very young for a college drafted hitter. He's only 21 and a half. So I think he's a good shout on your part.
At this point, too, we should just mention the last tidbit from that article.
I know we should have just read the whole thing, dude.
That said, Ben Ross apparently is throwing knuckleballs because the Twins are looking at turning hitters into two-way guys if they can pitch. Because what does Rocco love? Rocco loves more than anything to be able to stick a guy in left field and to be like, actually, now you're going to play second. Actually, now you're going to move into center. And if you can now stick a guy in your roster that can pitch and hit, well, there you go. Ben Ross is a phenomenal defensive infielder.
Yeah.
If he could come in and throw some knuckleballs. So I guess
that's
he did
wild.
I didn't realize that had happened, but
no, I didn't either. That's crazy.
Another fun gem.
Second question out of 3 from Wyatt. And this is slightly different. I kind of like this one too. So we covered biggest risers. He also asked, who do you think is the most underrated prospect outside of industry top 30 lists? Someone who's going to be on them by the end of the year. So anyone else you want to throw into your growing list of guys? And if you don't, I got 2 names to mention, 2 or 3 names to mention here.
I mean, this is kind of tricky, mostly because I read that question wrong when I was preparing for it. And
you want me to go first?
Well, no, I don't.
Because I'm going to steal your guy.
Let me hear your ideas, and then I'll tell you what I have written down.
Okay, so for the sake of convenience here, I just took Pipeline's top 30, just because it's been recently updated. And there's 2 guys that I would highlight that I think are very interesting. Now, I'm at risk of being called a homer for this take, but I do have to bring up Ty Langenberg as a guy. He is not on the top 30. He pitched 108 innings across Fort Myers and Cedar Rapids last year. 3.67 ERA, 3.28 FIP. Struck out 25% of guys, walked just 6.6% of guys. I think the goal will be, or what he would say is the goal would be, can he get to AA this year? But you have a guy who here is showing a good amount of starter traits, added pitches, he's added weight. He went over 100 innings in his first full season of pro ball. He's added significant velocity. Fastball was 92 in college. He's touching 96 now. And so if you want the next guy potentially in the Zebby, Andrew Morris, Corey Lewis mold of guys who just make steady progress up the minor league levels, Ty Langenberg should be on top 30 lists, in my opinion. Tom Fromming wrote a great article at Twins Daily a couple of weeks ago. The title was something along the lines of Ty Langenberg deserves more attention. Again, would encourage folks to check out that article. I'll throw one more name out there who's a draft guy from 24 I like, who's way down there. Caden Kendall, 23-year-old outfielder, a little bit undersized guy, 5'11", hits right-handed. I just really like what he does with the bat. 22-game sample at Fort Myers. He hit 284, 368, 373, good for a 118 WRC plus. You will like this, Jeremy, because he walks exactly the same amount as he strikes out. 10.5% walk rate, 10.5% strikeout rate. Obviously fairly limited sample size there, but just looks like he can hit a little bit. Looks like the approach is really solid. So Caden Kendall on the hitting side is a guy who I would tip to do well in 2025, who's also nowhere near top 30 lists just yet.
Yeah, no, I like those names. And I would add, it's harder unless you're getting a huge bonus as an international guy to make those lists early. You really have to produce. So I could see some additions to that. We talked about 6 names earlier, big risers. And so I could see those names. I do like yours. The way that I read that question The way that I read that question is guys that were not on the top 30 lists who could be on the team at the end of the year.
Oh,
So I'm
interesting.
like, this is a
Stretch.
it's an interesting question, but like you'd have to have specific skill sets, right?
Yep.
And so like Camargo as a catcher, right? There's really not a prospect that he would
Wow,
be.
you actually came up with a legit answer to that. That's
I,
solid.
I have a list. Okay. Um, Will Holland, if Kiersey is he was up for speed and defense. Will Holland might be the fastest guy in the organization with 26 guys. Does it make sense to have someone that you just have to run as a non-top 30 guy? He would be on the list. Carson McCusker, who would probably be a top 30-ish type prospect at the end of the year if he wasn't so old,
Yeah. Yep.
could hit his way as a right-handed power hitting outfielder to the Twins.
The
Right,
first baseman that Twins fans have been pining for.
6'8",
He's so big.
right-handed. Um, and then the only really two lefties outside of the guys that we already know about, Jalen Noel and Christian McLeod,
Yep.
potentially
Both good shots.
their way onto a Twins team, and really if they're performing, could make their way on the top 30 list as well. And so those are the names that I came up with, but it's like you have to be a very you have to fit a niche, because if you don't, there's prospects to do it. So
Jeremy, I'm so impressed that you came up with a list for that question. Quick aside on Carson McCusker. Saw him taking up bat for the Twins against the Red Sox in a spring training game. By that time, the stadium was really empty, so we're just moving around anywhere, and we sat right by home plate. That guy made the bat look like a matchstick in his hands. One of the largest human beings I've ever seen.
is it true that your son grabbed you and said, "Daddy, is that man a giant?"
He's such a large person. Um, yeah, that's a great list. Well done. Great answer. There you go, Wyatt. You got an answer to a question you didn't even ask. One more for you, Jeremy. I can't believe you made the list. I think we've had this one before, but we should revisit because we've heard very little. We have not talked about this guy, and or let me put it differently. We've barely heard this guy talked about in camp. Started with an injury, I believe. Bobby Nightingale just wrote a piece about him in the Strib. When do you expect Erod in the majors? Pardon me. And what would that mean for a player like Trevor Larnach? Assume here that Wyatt means would someone's job be in jeopardy if Erod forces his way up onto the major league team? What's your timeline here?
There's a lot of what ifs.
Yeah, for real.
If Erod is healthy and forces his way to the major leagues, it's going to happen with Trevor Larnach being awful or injured.
Mhm.
And I don't think we're going to see that. I think Trevor Larnach is turning a corner. And so for me, it's like the timeline is very dependent upon the health of the corner outfielders, and whether that's Trevor Larnach or Matt Wallner getting injured. That's kind of the succession, or Byron Buxton. And so he fits only if there's injury.
Mm-hmm.
He's not pushing anybody out of a job. But I could see him. I mean, I could see him if he proves that he's healthy and plays for a month and a half, that he could be up by Memorial Day. If there's an injury before that, I would guess that it would be a Deshaun Kiersey type instead, because you're not going to bring a guy up to not play every day, but you're also not going to bring a guy up who hasn't really done anything at AAA because he's been injured for the last year plus. And so I do think that if he's healthy and plays the way that you'd like to think that he can play, that he's going to be up in the major leagues, and kind of time sharing with other guys, because there's not a designated hitter that's going to be full time.
Anytime you hear some sudden silence, it's because Jeremy's having a coughing attack.
It's
Proceed.
so much fun. It's so much fun. I mean, Matt Wallner, you keep him in the outfield as much as you can. Trevor Larnach, I think he's an average defender that could certainly DH. And then you work through guys through. There's never there's never going to be a time where Roy Rocco's just, I shouldn't say that. You really hope there's not ever going to be a time where Rocco just sets a prospect on the bench or a young guy on the bench and doesn't play. He
Agreed.
rotates lineups so frequently, and
Yep.
he has guys that are flexible. So
Hmm.
uh, I don't think there's any way that we see him in the majors before Memorial Day. Um, but I do think that if he's healthy and playing well, and there's a need for an outfielder, corner or center field, that he could be up after that if healthy.
Nice. Way to go, Jeremy. All right, Wyatt. That's all of your questions plus a bonus question answered on Twins Farm System. We're gonna hop over some draft questions, dude. Can't wait.
And I only have to read the question then, and then I can mute myself so nobody has to listen to me start coughing. All right, so this is from Max, who read your article on stock up and stock down for the draft. Is there a player you're hoping might fall to the Twins at 16?
This is the first time we've speculated about the Twins' first pick this year. This is very exciting. I don't think it's kind of possible to talk through guys falling to 16 yet because the board's even less solidified than it normally is. And if you're a fan of such things, there is a consensus draft board getting ready to drop at all the places in the pretty near future, in the next 10 days or so. We're looking at like beginning of April here. But I really, thanks for this question. And there's a guy I want to talk about because the Twins have already drafted him. And his name's Corbin Dickerson. So Corbin Dickerson was, I want to say, the Twins' 20th round pick in 2022. You'll often see teams take a flyer on a high school guy that's perceived as unsignable with that pick, and they'll just see if they can get them to change their mind. Twins do that fairly frequently. Corbin Dickerson was a guy in 2022, and I'm just going to walk you through some of his numbers this year. Started his collegiate career at Louisville, redshirted, played a little bit last year, only 21 games, 58 WRC plus across that span. Here's what he's done so far in the same 21 game sample. Corbin Dickerson hitting 383, 468, 777. That is good for a 1.244 OPS, 165 WRC plus, 10 home runs in 20 games, 30 runs scored, 37 batted in. And if you look at his profile, he is laying waste to baseballs. He has a max EV of 117 this year, which you're going to get a little bit of fall off from metal bats to wood bats, but that's still top of the scale power in college. Really solid bat to ball skills, handles spin and off speed stuff well, plays good center field defense. If you want to talk about how off the radar this guy is, I think I'm right in saying he was not in Baseball America's top 200 list, which they released about a month ago. I'm going to make my bold prediction would be that he's going to be a first rounder. At worst, a second rounder, but I think he's going to be a first rounder. And so I'm interested and intrigued because the Twins already drafted him. Clearly, they saw things that they liked in that profile, and he is off to an absolutely smoldering start this year. So Corbin Dickerson is a guy who's really interesting. And so I wouldn't call that like falling because he's just like he's like the most helium name so far, I think, on the college side, certainly on the hitting side of college. But he's a guy to keep an eye on, Dickerson, who the Twins have taken before.
Okay, let me ask you this question. Is there a demographic that you would like to see fall to the Twins at 16?
So now I got to pull up. Didn't even have the board open. So whenever someone asks me this question, I'll just walk you through what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull up the board and I'm going to look in a like plus minus 5 range of where the Twins pick, just as like a talent barometer, and then kind of look at demos from there. So most of the guys around there, but in the 10 to 15 range, are college bats, a few of whom I actually like. I think it's just going to change so much is really, really hard to say. I don't, the college hitting crop this year is such a mess. It's a lot of like guys with very limited defensive positional value who have like power over hit profiles, which I'm not really a fan of. That just reeks of that just reminds me of Aaron Sabato. And I'm kind of burned there. So there's not like very many balanced profiles. So I don't really have a good answer. Some of the prospects I like in that range, Dean Curley, who's Tennessee shortstop, is really good. Brendan Summerhill, who's an outfielder for Arizona, I think he's going to be really solid. Wahiwa Aloy is a Hawaiian shortstop who plays for Arkansas. He's taken a big step forward offensively and looks a little better defensively this year. I like him a ton. He's actually consensus 16 at the moment. So at the moment in that range, college bats, I don't think there's a strong kind of leaning to a demographic yet.
So one of the questions that was posted a few weeks ago that we never asked, I think Cody asked who I thought the Twins were going to take.
Yeah.
And we never asked this question. So I just have to look at names, and then I get to try to find the ones that fit what the Twins like to do.
Mhm.
Right. And that's how we do everything that we do is you look at patterns, you look at things. And so the name that jumped out to me was Eli Willits. And I'm throwing this out early because he's a young for his class
Yeah, he is. He reclassified.
high schooler, right?
Mhm.
He is a player who comes from a baseball family, and he's got a 60 grade hit tool. And so for me, it's like without seeing anything, without knowing anything, when you can check a lot of the boxes that you know that the Twins like to check, that's a name that stuck out to me. So I just wanted to get that out there.
Okay. I don't have any comment on your hypothesis whatsoever.
That's fine. Now I'm going to ask you this next question. This is from Pete G. Pete says, true to form, the Twins picked 12 pitchers in round 7 through 20. In addition to Michael Carpenter, who else do you think will excel in Fort Myers and why?
Okay. So this is Pete G, super nice Pete G. So thanks for sending this question. Everyone is super interested in Michael Carpenter, which I think makes a lot of sense because left-handed pitchers are interesting. So did some digging. Got some details on Michael Carpenter's arsenal to share. So Carpenter came in as a like strike thrower with good fastball control was the word, right? And had a big strikeout record there. Here's where he's at now. Fastball ranging 91 to 96. So he's added some ticks there. 91 was like the college range. He's gone all the way up to 96. We'll say average 93, throwing a cutter around 90, a low to mid 80 slider, and an upper 80s changeup. So the Twins have added pitches. They've added velocity there. If you look at the Twins player development account, you will get your first look at Michael Carpenter just a couple of days ago. If you look at his delivery, it's very like lefty, like it's a very crossfire delivery. He's like throwing across his body. If you watch that video and then envision trying to pick up the ball out of his hand as a left-handed hitter, it's a difficult angle, I think, to kind of see the ball if the ball is coming across your body like that. So we'll see kind of where he settles in. I'm guessing he'll start at Fort Myers. But he's, for folks who have been excited about him, certainly promising that he's been able to add velocity. Seems like he's kind of diversified what he's throwing. Two other names I will throw out there, and I'm definitely going to get the rounds wrong here. The first guy I'll mention is Eli Jones. I want to say he was their 7th or 8th round pick last year. So he was the Friday night starter for South Carolina, I want to say. And he is a kind of east-west type of profile pitcher as opposed to north-south guy. So like sinker slider type coming out of the draft. He apparently has been up to 96 now with the Twins in spring training. That's a couple of ticks onto his fastball. And then if you want someone way further down the board, I want to say it's around 18 maybe, 18th round. Michael Ross, right-handed pitcher out of Samford University, which is in Alabama. Another guy who's added some in spring, and fastball sitting kind of 94 or 95 as opposed to what it was in college. The one thing I would say about this question is this. Any guy that you're asking about who's someone to look out for, if we're just using spring training as your kind of input, the only thing we're really asking is who's added velocity and who hasn't. Because ultimately, you're going to see in game action whose pitches are going to play, whose new slider is going to work, who can like leverage their arsenal successfully in game action. And none of those games have started yet, except minor league spring training games and live BP and all that good stuff. And so really what we're saying at the moment is who's been able to add the most velocity. And those are three guys that have done well with that. If we return to this question in June, we'll probably have a really different answer. Like you to put it a different way, you would never have expected the kind of season Zebby Matthews had going from high A all the way to the majors in 1 year. That was kind of completely out of left field.
Yeah, for sure. That's well put. All right, so last one. This is from Steven. Who is a pitcher the Twins could target with their first 2 picks?
So I'll give you again the like plus minus 5 delta from their 16th pick, even though I don't think it's super likely that the Twins would take a pitcher with their first pick. They haven't done that super often since we've been really deep in the weeds on the draft. There's a college pitcher who's really interesting right around that range right now called Kyson Witherspoon. He's a Friday night starter for Oklahoma. Maybe like, so he's like 6'2", 210. I mean, he is like really, really dynamic. Just wrote him up for the board. His fastball's now sitting 95 to 97. He can run it up to close to 100. Really good slider, generates a ton of miss. He definitely has some like reliever risk, but that's every pitcher pretty much. And he's just absolutely dominated. He's basically doubled his strikeout rate and then halved his walk rate this year in college. And on the hitting side, we often talk about how the Twins will kind of target like a breakout guy, a guy who's hit for more power. Tanner Schobel and Luke Keeschel were good examples there. So Kyson Witherspoon, a guy I would keep an eye on. If you want another guy in that range just for fun, even though I think this is unlikely, how about Cruz Schoolcraft? There's one of your plus names for this draft class. He is a 6'8" left-handed pitcher out of high school in Oregon. Fastball's already up to 98. It's like a lot of long limbs to get moving in the right direction. But if you think of someone like Noah Schultz, the White Sox prospect, that's the kind of profile you're looking at there, like a left-handed power guy who's just incredibly tall and is going to have nasty stuff with more projection there. So those are a couple of guys. I don't think either is necessarily likely, but those are guys who are sitting within range of where the Twins pick on the board right now.
All right. That's all the questions.
All right. That will do us for today. When we come back next week, this is just in time, Jeremy, because you've just turned blurry. We will be back roughly the same time next week. We are going to do an episode next week called The Case for a 1-1, which is something that we did last year where we dug into prospects at the top of the draft class to try and figure out who are the legit candidates to go 1-1. I will just preview by saying this year is going to be a million times harder than last year because the whole thing's a mess. So it should be a lot of fun. Thank you guys for listening, tuning in. Check out the Ty Langenberg episode if you didn't get a chance to yet. It's super fun. Enjoy the final few games of spring baseball. We'll catch you next week.